Hi everybody, good morning. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Brian Wagner. I'm the Chief Architect of Prodigio RTS. Prodigio RTS is the robotic trading system offered exclusively by TD Ameritrade and thinkorswim. It features a tool called Wizard Lab, and Wizard Lab is a environment which allows you to use a drag and drop user interface in order to create automated strategies. It lets you do the same things that you can do in a scripting language by simply dragging and dropping things together. In today's chat, we're going to talk about the philosophy of how you drag and drop things together and how this kind of works under the hood in the system. Really, you need a minimal amount of demonstration to get started with Prodigio Wizard Lab, and that's what's really nice, as opposed to a scripting language. Scripting language, you got to learn a lot, and you probably, if you're not a programmer, you have to take classes on how to learn to use a scripting language. Wizard Lab is something completely different. You can really just watch someone build something and you can get the gist of it because everything makes sense. It's a rational system built on simple gestures of user interface drag and drop. To get Prodigio, and I'll show you the platform here. For anybody joining us for the first time today, if you don't have access to the Prodigio trading platform, or if you know anybody that needs access, you need to request it. And so send in an email to support@thinkorswim.com with the subject line Prodigio activation. Make sure you include your username and your account number, and they'll get you set up in thinkorswim with our launch icons. And you'll notice that on my account here, under the Trade tab, I've got a button for the Prodigio launch. I've also got a Launch Prodigio button under my gadgets. And what that does is it launches us as a separate application, and this is the environment. And I'm looking at right now the Wizard Lab tab. Now it's a fully featured platform for trading that is completely synchronized with your thinkorswim account. So there's a portfolio for positions, there's order books for various orders, there's quotes views, channel or the trade optics, which I'll talk about. They are deployed, and I understand sometimes this sound gets choppy. Okay, so when that happens, I'll slow down a bit. Keep me up to date. Thanks for telling me that the sound kind of cut out. When this happens, I'll try to slow down. Right? Okay, very good, very good. And I'll try to repeat anything salient that you guys might have missed. If you're on a TDA account, you can still get permission for the Prodigio paper money system, and they are working round the clock over there on consolidating everything to allow you to have Prodigio, in addition to bringing together a number of other things. So they've, on the TD side, they've been working on a lot over there. Those guys are really busy. They're doing a great job, and pretty soon you will also be able to trade under your live TDA account. Now, I recommend, it's very simple to fund a thinkorswim account. It's a very simple funding, especially if you're already a TDA client. And if you do that, then you can immediately take advantage of the live trading in the Prodigio system. So make sure that you get permissioned. And I also want to talk about questions and answers. So support for Prodigio in the trading platform. I'm going to try to go through some of these concepts and some of the philosophy. I'll try to kind of enlighten some people who know the platform very well on maybe some things that happen behind the scenes. And I'll also try to give a general overview. But support is always available with two methods. Number one, you can send in questions to prodigio@thinkorswim.com. And the help desk is really great. They tirelessly try to answer the influx of emails they get. They get a lot of questions. And they can really help you with specifics on accounts and trading and setup, etc., etc. If you have questions specifically about rules or strategies or technical analysis, which are not mainly account related, I strongly encourage you to come into this Prodigio chat room on the thinkorswim trading platform, and we have a presence here usually during market hours, but specifically I see here 9:15 to 11 a.m. is probably the best time, but there's usually someone around. And if you're not available during that time, you can always post questions on the forum as well. Our home on the web is www.prodigio. Are archived. You can also find in blog entries any strategies or rules that we cover. Cutting out again, so I'm going to slow up a little bit. Again, they're working on this on that other side. It's the capture software, has some buffering issues sometimes. Okay, guys, how about now? Is this a little better? Coming back? Okay, good, good. Okay, so make sure you ask your questions here, and guys at Prodigio, make sure that we're taking these questions and that we're getting back to everybody. We have exactly. I I got my generator under my desk here, and I'm kind of cycling to kind of keep it up. Okay, so it looks like it might be related to flipping screens a little bit. I'll try to reduce that as much as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to go back over to the Prodigio platform, and we're going to focus on this as the main center point of our conversation today. Okay, very good, very good. So Prodigio Wizard Lab, all about building rules and building strategies. It's deployed on the server, and this is a philosophy that we have always had with the Prodigio system. This is different than a client-side system, right? And the two differences right here in the upper right-hand corner of the platform. So make sure you get activated, and just watch that. That's a really great introduction. Hopefully it should be coming back. Yep, I saw a bunch burst through, so yeah, it's coming through on both sides. Okay, so now we're back, and let's start talking about the philosophy of Prodigio Wizard Lab. It's server side. That means when you build these rules and these strategies, they are deployed on the server. Yeah, I feel your pain. This is very painful, actually. Okay, so Prodigio 101. I recommend strongly that you go to, and I'm going to try to minimize my cursor movement. I strongly recommend that you go to the video archive and watch the earlier videos, say the first 3 about Prodigio introduction. Exactly. I'm going to try not to blink. Hopefully I will try to, yeah, exactly. This is bugging me too. I'm going to try to fill this in with maybe some intelligent conversation. Hopefully the audio is going to buffer a little bit better. So this is a fun day. This is kind of like a rainy day at school. This is like a YouTube video or something. When the chat's done, go to prodigiorts.net and check out the video archive. There's going to be every chat that we do is archived there. And I believe, I encourage you to follow up on the seminars, because I believe they are offering some introductory courses about Prodigio and Wizard Lab. follow up on that. And guys, if you could give me a hand if anybody knows the specifics on that, those courses that they have. There are training courses I know that TD is offering. Yes, this session is archived. It'll be on www.prodigiorts.net under the video archive. And if you are interested in a 15-minute introduction, there's an icon in the upper right-hand corner of the screen right here. Just click that, and that's just a very brief introduction. But I'm going to start. So did that probably didn't come through about the server-side deployment. Ever since its beginning, Prodigio Wizard Lab has been a server-oriented system. And what that means is it's capable of scaling out to much larger symbol lists than a client system can possibly. Things that you can do, for example, in a think script, but with the think scripts, you can only scan like a limited universe of symbols. They're chart oriented, which is very great. But with the Prodigio system, it's capable of doing much larger scans. And when it finds orders and makes trades against the rules of those orders, it can send them. Is that server-side systems are not subject to you being connected or logged in. And there's a feature that we just added recently. Under the RTS Strategies panel, which is the panel which, when you build a strategy and when you deploy it, this is where you go in order to make the server-side deployment. When you check off a strategy, there is an expiration trading date, right? And so what this does is this allows you to set how long you want the system to be activated for. So for example, if you drop down right here, you can select a date which will allow you to pick how long the system is going to be activated for. When you hit apply, that's going to change the expiration date. This will allow the strategy to continue running on the server continuously. And so in other words, this will let you, yeah, this sounds cutting in and out. This is killing me. This lets you leave the system and the strategy running constantly. So you can let this run on the server side overnight or over the weekend, and this will continuously scan the symbol list, it'll fire trades, and it'll manage positions. So talking about Wizard Lab and the philosophy of Wizard Lab, what this is a drag and drop user interface which allows you to create strategies using simple drag and drop interfaces. And so I can express things such as, moving averages. I can scroll down and I can select, here's an exponential moving average. And I can express, let's say, a 20-period exponential moving average using simple drag and drop type gestures. And what I'm doing here is I am building an exponential moving average of 20 periods on the 15-minute OHLC bars. This is the same thing as if I looked at a chart, I selected 15-minute intervals, and I added a chart study for exponential moving average at 20 periods. Now, it's really easy to go to a chart, right, and to, set up a 15-minute chart and that's expressing my exponential moving average. You can get this to show up in scripting languages without too much effort, but the problem comes in when you are trying to actually do anything sophisticated with it, right? And let's see. Okay, guys, how about now? Is that a little better? Does that sound a little bit better? Okay, I'm going to put up another exponential moving average on here. And I'll put this at a different speed, for example. let's see. I'll put this up there. I'll change the color of it. Let's see, 10. Okay, good. Okay, good. So for example, let's say I have two different speeds of moving averages. And I can see this. Actually, let me brighten this up a little bit so it's a little clearer. Let me make it thicker. And okay, that's showing up a little bit better. And I'll take my yellow one and I'll make this a little bit thicker too. It starts to become more difficult in a scripting language when you want to do more intelligible strategy. So here's an example where I might want to go long when this faster exponential moving average crossovers are not enough for a successful scanning or trading system. Right? And this keeps cutting out, so I'm trying to go a little bit slower, maybe to assist the buffering. Let's see. Maybe if I maximize that. Okay, so let's hear. I think that might be back right now. Okay, so I'm basically talking about some really simple things here. I'm comparing really a scripting language versus Wizard Lab, and I'm starting right now with how you would go about doing something in a scripting language. Right, so for example, if you're writing a script, if you're building up a script, it might not be very difficult to get these moving averages to cross above and below one another, but now I want to add another part into it. Right? Now I want to make sure that, say, the RSI is above or below a certain threshold. Now if this RSI is below this threshold, if I were using this in a script, if I were writing a script with this, now it starts to become even more complicated. I have to find some way to combine the moving average crossover with the RSI, right? And again, you might learn more about the scripting language. You might become more and more sophisticated with building the strategies, but now some other curveballs come in at you. For example, now you want to use the system to find things that are highly correlated with the markets, or you want to find things that are trending, or general concepts which are, you're looking for patterns in the market, or you're looking for broad market direction. These things, and especially combining different intervals together, become progressively and progressively and progressively more difficult. What we're doing with Prodigio Wizard Lab is we're expressing this not in code, but in visual drag and drop. And right, so the philosophy is you drag and drop things on the canvas which and we've got the red crossing above the yellow. The way that you express that in Prodigio Wizard Lab is with drag and drop gestures. And what I can do is I can scroll up to my source data, I can drag out OHLC, and these are basically representing my chart studies. And the philosophy of Wizard Lab is that you always take a study that you're looking at and you do something with that. You take a series of transformations, a series of things that you see on the chart, and you combine those together. Right? So right now, I've got two periods of EMA, 20 and 10, right? is it allows me to take two different speeds of EMA, and what this does is it represents those two EMAs crossing over one another. And actually, I apologize about the buffering that continues to happen. Again, this chat is a little more introductory, but I hope to kind of divine some of these, some of the things that we're doing on the server behind the scenes under the hood to you guys a little bit later on. Also trying to, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat room just to make sure that when this sound cuts out that I kind of slow up a little bit as well. What I'm doing here is, with some drag and drop gestures, is expressing how you have a 10-period EMA cross above a 20-period EMA. Right? And so if I look at this chart, I can express that, but the key in Prodigio Wizard Lab is that I can add things to the rule with, just by simply dragging and dropping more onto the canvas. So for example, I can go inside the Wizard Lab tab, and I was talking about using the RSI. So I'm kind of taking all the ingredients for the things that I see on a chart, and I'm dragging and dropping these out onto the canvas, and I'm combining all of these together. Right? And so really I'm just walking through some of this with you guys now. Let's pull out that RSI. And so the way that you do that in Wizard Lab is you start with some kind of source data, which represents the initial data that you want to look at. So for example, in this case we're looking at OHLCs. Right? I can select 15 minutes, and in order to get this RSI that I see on the chart, cut in or out because we're kind of doing it in the other room. I have to talk to these guys about this. This output for this cross above study, we're going to combine this in some kind of rule which is going to do something for us. So for example, the way you think about this is, when this exponential moving average crosses over, what do I want to do with it? And we're actually going to combine some things together, and I'm going to show you how you combine those things together. So I'm starting with step one. I'm looking at a chart. I'm looking at the types of things that I want to look at, right? And then step two, I'm going to blend those together inside of the Wizard Lab rule. Right? So for example, I've got my RSI, and that was a 10 period, so I can edit the number of periods by dropping down to 10 period RSI. Right? And so I'm looking at my chart right here, and I've got an exponential moving average crossover and a 10 period RSI. With the RSI, I want to express something such as, I want to make sure it is below 30 or greater than 70, or some kind of logic in order to take advantage of the 10 period RSI study. So if I go over into Wizard Lab, is below the threshold of 30. And the way that you express that in Wizard Lab, it's very simple. You can just go to the logical operators, and we have some logical operators here which allow you to compare things such as greater than, less than, crossing above, crossing below, and some more sophisticated ones. But I can quite simply compare this to a constant operator. And I can drop this down, I can change this to 30, and this is exactly how I can express this RSI 10 period being less than 30. Right. I see some more great questions coming through the chat room as well. I see a question coming in about Heikinashi. I see some questions about seeing the output of the rules. Right. And I actually want to share with you some of the things that we're working on currently. And I understand, some of these. we have to kind of address some of these chats to new users, and we have to address some of these chats to more sophisticated users. So we try to mix it up. This one's a little bit more catered to people who are just seeing Prodigio for the first time and trying to get used to it. But we try to mix it up, and I do recommend you check out some of the earlier chats if you haven't seen those already, where we talk about how to use Prodigio as a scanning system using trend and correlation. Right now, all these things, we're working on some things right now, which is really going to tie a lot of this together, and this will actually answer those two questions that I brought up about the Heikinashi and about the seeing the output of the rules inside of the rule builder. Right? Zigzag indicators can be handled with, we have a study in here called capture. Right? And I'll talk a little bit about that, but that's going to become even more useful when we have this charting build that we're doing. We're working on tightly integrating. Now, what's that? Oh. No, I'm fine. Okay, guys, hang on one second. What a disaster. Okay, back. I'm back, guys. Some of the things that we're working on is we're tying in Wizard Lab directly into the charting, so that as you're dragging and dropping these out, you'll be able to see them update the charts in real time as it happens. And if you're developing a strategy, especially to a specific symbol, or today's a funny day. Today must have been a full moon. Must have been a full moon at some point. But anyway, this is going to tie in not only things like Heikinashi, visually seeing the rules as they're built on the chart, but also the drawings themselves, right? So for example, this is something that you're going to be able to do very soon in Prodigio Wizard Lab. You're going to be able to, for example, make a chart drawing, and you're going to be able to use this drawing directly inside a Wizard Lab rule. Right? So for example, you will be able to use this by simply creating visual trend lines, right? And you will be able to visualize this directly in the Wizard Lab rule. So that's some of the things that that we're working on. They're really more and more enhancements on top of the base platform. But the base platform is an engine that's designed to take technical analysis studies, to combine those, and to have some kind of logical combination where these things come together, and you can kind of mix and match all of these technical analysis studies together. Okay, so getting back to what I was doing here, what I'm working on is very simple, but to do this in a scripting language becomes ever more and more complicated. I've now got something, this cross above study. This now represents the 10-period EMA crossing above the 20-period EMA, and this bottom one, this less than study, it now represents the 10-period RSI being below the 30 line. Right? So for example, I want to combine these together. Right? And the simplest, the easiest way to combine these together is to go in and to take an AND study, and an AND is a logical operator which quite simply combines the two things together, where you have A and B both have to be happening at the same time in order to make these fire at the same time. Right? And so what I've been able to do right here is take the two EMAs and combine this with the RSI, right? And I want to keep going, for example. right? So I took those two things, and now let's say I want to do something else. Let's say I want to look at a broad market indicator, right? So for example, we've got a mention in here about using the SPX. We had a couple chats last week and the week before where we talked about incorporating broad market direction and correlation into the strategies and how you would do that in Prodigio Wizard Lab. So for example, let's say I've got my security here, my one symbol that I'm looking at, the apple on the 15-minute, and maybe I want to tie that in with the broad market direction. So let's say I look at like an SPX chart, and let's say I want to make sure that the SPX is trending, right? And we talked about more sophisticated ways of measuring trend and momentum, and there's going to be even more sophisticated ways in the upcoming chats where we actually try to create channels and things like that. But let's start with something very simple just to get the idea, for anybody who's seeing this for the first time. If I look at a simple moving average, and I'm looking at a 20-period simple moving average, right, one thing I might want to check for is if the price is above or below an X-period moving average. So here I'm looking at a chart of the S&P 500, and I want to make sure that, say, price is above or below its moving average. And this is going to be a very basic rule. If the price is currently above the moving average, I'm going to consider that to be bullish. And if the price is below the moving average, I'm going to consider that to be bearish. All right, so this is a daily chart. Let's make this 15s, just to be very simple. And you can interpret this in any way that you want. I'm looking at this right now, and I'm seeing kind of a gap down, and it's kind of recovering off of it. It's kind of struggling to kind of pull back. So right now I'm just, in my very basic simple rule, going to consider this to be bullish, right? And of course this all depends on what you're trying to do, but let's suppose that's my concept, that's my strategy. Suppose I want to say this means bullish. Well, the way I can express that in Wizard Lab is I can continue adding to my canvas. Right, and what I can do, you can also collapse these if you want to give yourself more room. You can kind of collapse these down to shrink these, and it becomes a little more compact. So I'm taking that existing set of logic, and I'm shrinking that down, right? And I've got this first part of my strategy, and now I want to add a broad market direction. So for example, I was looking at the SPX before, and the way I can target a very specific symbol for analysis in Wizard Lab is I can go to my source data one more time, I can drag out the single OHLC study, and this is a little bit different in that it allows me to pick a specific symbol. So for example, I can look at SPX individually, right? I can look in a 15-minute interval on the SPX, and my strategy was very simple. I'm going to say that the broad market is generally bullish if it is above its 20-period simple moving average. I'm going to consider it bearish if it's below its 20-period simple moving average. So back in Wizard Lab, I can do something much like I did with the exponential moving averages. I can get that moving average by scrolling down to my SMA study, which is my simple moving average study. Right, so I've got that here. I can bump this up to 20 periods, and now I've got something that's specifically looking at the SPX. Right, and what I want to do is I want to compare the SPX price against its moving average. So I want to look at another study that just looks at the price. Right, so I can copy this single OHLC. I can paste it here, and what comes out of these studies, now notice I've been dragging and dropping things together, right? And this is a good time to really explain this. These studies represent a series of transformations. The transformations operate on a series of inputs and outputs, right? So you are actually programming without doing the programming and without writing the scripts. You start with something called source data, which I've been referring to, and that's quite simply the data feed. That's the values coming into the system for your scans, for your rules and strategies. And the single OHLC is looking at one very specific data feed, in this case the SPX. Well, I want to do something with that data feed. I want to create a chart study. I want to run some technical analysis, etc., etc. And the way that you connect these is quite simply expressed by outputs leading into inputs. So in other words, the source data comes into the system and it's going to produce outputs, which are the OHLC values. Right? So I can drag and drop this, right? And so I can put this into any other kind of input. Right? And it's always a chained series of outputs into inputs. So for example, this SMA study, in this case, is taking the output of the single OHLC and it's being fed into the input of the SMA. And that's saying, do the SMA study on the output of the single OHLC. And that's something to understand with the system, is that you can manipulate these outputs in any way that you want. And exactly like a scripting language where you would be programming this into a script, you're taking these values and you're managing them to exactly the specifics of your strategy and your rule. Right, so here I'm just looking at the single OHLC and I'm going to use this output directly. Now by default it's going to use the closing price of the OHLC. If you want to use something else, for example the high, you can go down into the adapters, right, and you can take the high adapter, right, and you can feed the output of the single OHLC into the input of the high adapter, and that is going to use the high price as the output, and now this would be the high prices. And I could use that in another study, in another moving average type study, etc., etc. Anything that you would want to do using technical analysis or basic arithmetical calculations. So I'm going to compare the single OHLC price and I'm going to find out if it is, now I've been orienting this strategy for cross above. Right, so I'm going to look to go long, and if I go long I want to go long with the market. So I'm going to make sure that the price is above its 20 period simple moving average. So I go into my logical operators, I take a greater than study, and I send the input of the single OHLC into input A of the greater than operator, and the 20 period moving average into input B of the greater than operator. And this says, in addition to the scan that I'm doing, specifically look at the SPX and make sure that it is, in my definition, a bullish trend. Now the point is, you can manipulate this in any way that you want. You might consider this strategy to be fairly naive, and I would agree with you. There's more sophisticated ways to monitor and to measure trend in the market. But the idea is still the same. The idea is you're still taking the series of outputs and feeding those into the inputs of another study. And that study acts as a transformation. But this is producing another logical output that I can again combine into my rule. Right? And so you'll notice as I'm dragging and dropping these things together, I talked about using an AND study. Right, so let me copy this AND study and let me paste this down here. Right, and what I can do is I can combine these things together. And what I just did was I added another and I added the lower branch into the input B of that AND study. So I combined all three of these things together to create a somewhat sophisticated rule. And that's the point about the Wizard Lab philosophy, is that we're trying to make it easy so that you can bring things out onto the canvas, combine them together, and change your mind about things. One thing that's very difficult to do with scripting languages is it's very difficult to change your mind. So for example, if you start with a script and there's 3 components to that script, it's very difficult to go into the middle and tweak it and to change the middle of it, especially if it's a very, very long script. But with Prodigio's Wizard Lab, it's a simple matter of adding more or subtracting from. And you see this visually spread out on the rule building canvas so that you can quite simply just join things together. Now when you're done with your rule, you end this rule with a trade action, right? And we have one trade action right now which is quite simply called signal. This signal represents the end at the end point of the rule. this is either forming bar on or off, and you don't have to worry about what that means right now. But if I feed the final output into an ending signal, this kind of closes off the rule, and I've got something that I can now use in deployment. Right? So for example, I've got this message up in the upper left hand corner. It now says my rule is valid. Right? And if it's valid, I can save this and I can give this rule a name. Right? And I'm going to show you how I use this in a strategy. So I'm going to call this EMA cross with trend. Right? So that's going to be the name of my rule, and I would want to give it some kind of description just so that I can recall what exactly it's doing. And it basically has three parts. EMA 1020 crossover. I'm going to say cross above. RSI below 30, and SPX uptrend. Once I've saved that rule, it now becomes a part of my library that I can build for myself. And it shows up right here in the my rule as an EMA cross with trend. If I go over to my strategy builder, I can combine these rules together inside of a strategy. And that's really the next step in creating a Wizard Lab strategy. You take the rules that you build and you say, now that I have this logic, which is driven off of the things that I wanted to do by looking at the charts, how do I merge those together inside of a strategy? And in here, it's a slightly different environment, right? But I can drag and drop this into the scanning rule, right? And this rule that I had built, EMA cross with trend, becomes the initial part of my strategy where when this thing fires signals, and remember, it's going to be firing signals based on this right here. Whenever all of these things line up, whenever the cross above happens, whenever my RSI is less than 30, and whenever my trend is greater than my 20-period moving average, when all of those things happen, it's going to trigger a signal into the system. And that signal is going to do something, and what it does is defined by the strategy. So in the first part of this strategy, I'm going to say I want to run a scan, and that's why it's my scanning rule, using this EMA cross with trend rule. And when that happens, trading is going to happen, or a trade optic signal is going to fire. Right? And I'm going to talk about what that means, but it basically means that the rule kicks in and it gives you some kind of signal. Now that signal, you usually want to manage that with something. And on the left-hand pane, under the management side, you can select some order rules in order to tie with your position, but you can also have exit rules scan the position as well. So for example, I had built a couple other rules prior to this, and I'm trying to see if there's an exit rule here. Well, one thing that I might want to do, let's try to build an exit rule really quick. One thing I might want to do is, if I'm going long when it crosses above, I might want to exit when it crosses below. So for example, if I go long on this 10 and 20 EMA cross over here, I might want to exit when it crosses back below at this point up here. In order to express that in Wizard Lab, it's going to be the same thing that I did to build my scanning rule. I'll go into my Wizard Lab in step 1 rule builder. I'll start with a new rule. Right? And I'll go down to my source data. And what I'll do is I'll just drag and drop some things out and I'll recreate that cross. I know that in order to do a cross, I'm going to need 2 different branches, right? And so they're both going to have to look at EMA crosses. I'll scroll back down into my exponential moving average. And I'm going to look at 2 of these here. I'm going to look at a 10 crossing a 20. Right? And this is going to be the opposite. I'm looking for a cross below. So I'll look at some logical operators. I'll pull out a cross below. And I'll have this be my input A and I'll have this be my input B. When that happens, I'm simply going to trigger an ending signal. And you can see how simple this is. This is much simpler than my scan, which had all of those components. And that's fine, because if you're going to do position management, if there's some kind of condition that triggers in, which if that happens, that would result in a condition that you would want to close out a trading position, you can just create all of these small exit rules. And what I'll do is I'll call it exit. Right? What I did was I clicked on this EMA cross with trend and I added a suffix, so I said exit. Right? I'll tweak my description. And what you can do is you can build up a library of exit rules, and under the strategy builder you can drag these in from your management my rules. And so here's the exit rule that I had made, and when that happens, that's going to exit. And I can put as many of these here as I want. So for example, some of them are just orders that are placed right out of the box as soon as a position's made. I can drag this in here and I can put a stop order in. And so for example, if it's going to go long, and I can collapse this to give myself some more room to work with. If it's going to go long, I can put a trailing stop, let's say a percentage below the position. So let's say I've got a 1% trailing stop below the position. I can do that by simply tweaking the different parameters inside of the strategy builder. And what these do is they set up how orders should be placed relative to how you want to trade. Right? So this is nothing more than fill in regarding the parameters for when it robotically trades a position based off your logic. How should I place the orders? Should I go in at market? Should I put a limit order? Should that limit order have a timeout associated with it? In other words, if it doesn't fill in a minute, should I cancel? Should I have an offset pegged to the bid or the ask, etc.? We kind of covered this in the last chat, and so I recommend checking that out to for some overview about some sophisticated things you can do for this. But to start, you can really just set this up to market orders, and you can get a feel for the system, especially in paper money, to see how this is, how it fires signals and executes trades, etc. But you can put as many of these management rules as you want, and so that's why you can build a library for yourself that when certain things happen, you can liquidate that position. So building a strategy is a simple matter of combining the rules that you built together, and it's designed to be somewhat form fill, so it's somewhat intuitive, and it's really how you want it to trade. And when I've got this set up, I can save this as a strategy, and this is kind of an SPX based crossing strategy. Notice I called my original rule EMA cross with trend. So I'll call this EMA cross with trend, and I'll just call it strategy. Once I've created my strategy, using Wizard Lab, I can run a back test. And so notice I can open the strategy that I want to back test here. And this already was selected as soon as I saved that strategy. It already preloaded it into the back test. And what I can do is I can run this on any symbol list that I want. So for example, if I just want to run it on a single symbol, I could type that in here. If I wanted to run it on a predefined list, I can drop down, and so for example I've got the NASDAQ 100 that I can run this on. I can select some parameters in order to run this backtest, and what this is going to do is this is going to use a simulated portfolio. You can edit these settings of the portfolio here. So for example, if I want to run this on let's say a $100,000 initial buying power, I can change that. I can hit apply and hit OK, and I can run this over the last week and see what it does. This will submit the backtest for execution on the server, and it'll deploy and run this strategy in backtest. Now when this is done, this will come back and it'll give me a set of results. Right, so right now this spinner is going off. It's saying that the backtest is running, and as I'm waiting for this to run, I want to talk a little bit about the symbol list editor. So I said that you could drop down here and you could select the symbol list that you want to run this on. Well, you can also press this button right here, which will open up the symbol list editor. And what this does is this shows all of the lists that you create. And those lists are also available in the quotes tab, but you can create various lists and you can edit these lists. So for example, I hit the edit button right here for this Forex ETF list, which we built in the last chat. I think this was either in the Forex chat or I think it was the Prodigio chat. The last Prodigio chat we talked about this. No, actually, I think this was the Forex chat. But anyway, you can go in here and you can modify, what symbols you want it to trade, etc., etc. And when you're done with this, you can save this list. And by saving this list, now I probably wouldn't want to put those symbols on the Forex list, but now I've modified this Forex list right here. Right? And so if I scroll up, I've got this Forex ETF list. That backtest finished. I didn't get any results back on it. So I might have to, for example, increase the time frames, etc. Or if I don't get any results in my backtest, I might need to actually tweak the parameters of the rule. There's another great question about successful pre-built rules. The guys at Shadow Trader are building some very successful rules, particularly related to the pairs trading. And let's see, there's the pairs trading, and there's these, I think these Forex scanning ones. These ones they were having a lot of success with. But as far as particulars of strategies themselves, I recommend number one, you check out the information available on Shadow Trader. Number two, you check out discussions in the chats or on the forums themselves. So most of the efforts on the dev team are going towards building the tools, which is basically creating this environment that allows us to do this. But the Shadow Trader guys are building some really cool stuff actually. And let's see if I get anything. I actually changed my strategy. I went to one of these Forex EMA strategies and I picked the Forex ETF list, and I changed the start date and the end date. And actually, this is one that we were probably playing with. Yeah, and it's also trading the symbols that I had added. So let's take a look at one of these. So this is pretty cool. This is one that went long on this Forex ETF. This would have been a really good trade. It was still being traded by the end of the back test. And we're always adding various improvements and tweaks. One of the things is we're going to give a little bit more options to the back test that show the open P&L as well. That's something that we're kind of getting around to. But our number one focus right now is on charts and some other things related to data, et cetera, fundamentals, that kind of stuff. But we're really excited about what we're working on with charts because this really ties everything in together. But so here's a Forex strategy. It's open on these 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. It's still open. It didn't close them yet, but these look like fairly good trades. This was a really great one. So these look pretty good, but it did close these 3 at a loss, right? So this is something that, say, the Shadow Trader group is working on. But that's basically a brief synopsis about how you use backtest in Prodigio Wizard Lab. You can create the strategy by combining the rules together and run the backtest, and this is really a fun scanning environment. I was talking with Peter the other day from Shadow Trader, and he was actually using Prodigio Wizard Lab to do correlation scans in order to search for pairs trading opportunities. Now that's one thing that they do really well, is that there's the Shadow Trader pairs trading newsletter, and they do some really cool stuff there, and they're actually using this system in order to do scans on the market to find things that are highly correlated or good trading opportunity setups, and they actually talk about them in the Shadow Trader newsletter. So that's something that we've got going on, which I'm really excited about because they're having some success over there with that. Now once you've got a strategy and you want to begin playing with it in real time, this is what I'm going to talk about, basically the difference between RTS strategies and trade optics. Right? So when you go into step 4 of Wizard Lab, there's a link for deploy to RTS strategies. I'll go back. There's a link for deploy to trade optics. Right? And all these do is they tab over to the RTS strategies and the trade optics tab. And this gives you an environment which lets you deploy not only the Wizard Lab rules and strategies that you built, but also there's a lot of out-of-the-box pre-built rules. And each one of these has a description, and you can talk to some of the guys in the room about what these actually do. But there's a lot of these that were built by a couple people a while ago, and so There's things that, for example, look for short-term momentum plays. They look for CCI, RSI plays, etc., momentum. There's a lot of things in here. And any one of these in the pre-builts, you can actually click on this edit button, and that will load it into step 2, the strategy builder. And it'll also load the scanning rule into the rule builder, and you can see what it's trying to do. This is an example of a rule that's looking at a Keltner channel crossover. So the Keltner channel, in this example, it's a 14-period Keltner channel with a multiplier of 2. Right? That's 2, actually in this case, ATRs above and below its true range based, its typical price based moving average. Right? So we don't have to get into the details of that now. It's kind of in the description, and it's also in the descriptions of the studies. This is using a time operator. There's time studies in Prodigio Wizard Lab that let you control starting and end times. But the difference between RTS strategies and trade optics is that RTS is the robotic deployment. And so in other words, when you check these off, so right now this is running the Forex EMA on the ETF list, the Forex ETF list. I can take any one of these. I can select the symbol list, and I can check that off. And what that does is that actually takes this strategy that I had built previously called Corel Scan. It's a correlation scanner. That's deploying it on the S&P 100 list, and that's now being robotically traded by the account. Now, here's a position. This is up, $52 on this paper trading account. Here's a position that was traded by the Forex strategy, and this actually must have happened within the last week since the last show. But Prodigio is robotically managing these positions according to the strategy that you built and the risk parameter settings of the account. Now, all you need to know for this kind of introductory chat is that inside here, these risk settings apply to the account as a whole, right? And so you can set things such as various account drawdowns, position drawdowns, etc., and these basically govern the robotic trading on the account. And RTS strategies is what deploys it on the account for robotic trading. Now you also have a second option, and that's what the trade optics is designed to do. The trade optics is like a scanning system, and it doesn't robotically trade, but it populates this trade scan alerts queue. And what this will do is if I check off, so I've got some kind of strategy running which is obviously not giving me any signals, I can check off some other ones. So for example, I can go here, pull out some kind of bigger list, right? Here's an S&P 500 list. Right? And I can just deploy these, and what this will do is it'll deploy the strategies, and as they find signals, these will start populating the trade optics queue. And the frequency with which it'll find signals completely depends on the kind of strategy you're building. So if you're building a high frequency based strategy, you might see a lot of signals, or if you're building a more conservative type trend scanning strategy, you might see a lot less signals, etc. It all depends on what you're trying to do with the system, but those signals will come into your trade scan alerts. When they come in, there will be a trade now button which you can press, and that will populate the order management. You'll also see when you push that button, you'll see the trade opportunity come up on the chart itself. Right, so this system, and I really want to talk about not just introductory stuff. I want to talk about the philosophy of the system. It's built, now that I guess this is coming through pretty well. I guess this is not stuttering as bad as it was before, so that's pretty good. I need to talk slower. I guess that's why. There is an FAQ out on the web. There's a lot of questions involved there, but you can always ask questions in this chat room directly, and usually you get a pretty quick response from some of the @Prodigio guys. But the philosophy of Prodigio Wizard Lab is simple. We're creating a server-side infrastructure that allows you to scale the strategies. There's some limits on that, right? But there's kind of ways around some of those limits, and if you start to use the system for a long time, you'll start to see how you can do this. For example, if you want to scan more symbol lists, you can create more versions of the same strategy, etc., etc. But we're building a server-side infrastructure which is capable of doing large scans on the market. For the reasons that I explained before, minimizing latency, letting the system run without having your computer turned on or logged in, and being able to handle larger sets of symbols. That's what Prodigio Wizard Lab is all about, and that's what makes it different than Thinkorswim's the ThinkScripts. My point is that that's just what makes it different about the ThinkScripts. It's focused on the server-side deployment, and it's focused on providing tools that allow you to create this drag and drop type of user interface. So yeah, it does look like, yeah, okay. It does look like sometimes this thing is still buffering. But the philosophy is that what you're doing is you're basically creating the scans that run on the server and manage the account and fire trade signals. The things that we're working on are providing more tools for you that allow you to use this drag and drop interface more closely with charts. And so we expect that by the time this is done, we expect these charts to be some of the most useful charts that really you can find out there because of what you can do with the engine. Everything is built on this engine, which is designed for server-side infrastructure, but this same engine is built in a modular fashion. And this engine is actually planted on the inside of the client. Right? And so that's what we're tying together. We're tying together the charting package in with the rule builder. And what you're going to have is something that really doesn't exist out there on the market. You're going to have the ability to dynamically nest and change direction. Just like I was kind of showing you before. Let me open that up again. I can actually go down to the My Rules and pull up this EMA cross with trend again. And you see there's a lot of stuff going on inside of this rule. But I can change direction immediately. If I don't want this to be a part of it anymore, I can just rip it out. And it's as simple as that. I can change direction immediately. And this same ability you'll be able to do on the charts. And the real advantage to that is that because of Prodigio's engine, you can nest these things indefinitely. So for example, here's the real nuts and bolts of it. I can go in and I can take my RSI and I can smooth this in any way that I want. Right? So for example, I can go down to my technical analysis indicators, I can grab an EMA, and with a couple really quick gestures, what I've done is I've smoothed this RSI with an exponentially weighted moving average. Right? And I can keep going. So for example, another tool that I talk about a lot, which is very useful, is a standard deviation. And I can actually go down, I can take my standard deviation, I can send the EMA into the standard deviation study. And what I've been able to do, and I'm a little cluttered here, so let me clean some of this up. I've been able to express this with a couple simple drag and drops, which is exponentially more simplified than it is with building a script. And this same type of drag and drop user interface is what we're tying into the charts. And so for example, what you will be able to do is you will be able to see RSI studies plotted with a smooth DMA. And what I can do, and you can do this on a lot of charting packages to an extent, I can put, for example, an exponential moving average here. Right, and that's it's hard to see, but it's actually this red dotted line. And actually, let me make that thin. Let me go down to the this one, and let me make this a little thicker, actually. So you see this white dotted line? This is an exponential moving average of the RSI, but what if I want to do something with this? And what if I want to do something such as, drag this and put this study up here or move it around, etc., etc. This engine that we have designed is capable of doing this, and this is something that a lot of other charting packages really don't have. You can take this exponential moving average of the RSI and do anything you want with it. For example, take a standard deviation, etc. And that's really the system that we continue to build. So we're leveraging the power of this server-side engine, and we're tying this into charts. And as you work with the rule builder everything's going to be seamlessly integrated. So that's what you can look forward to, but that's really how this thing works behind the scenes. It's really just an engine, and you're manipulating that engine based on the drag and drop gestures. So that's basically going to wrap it up for the chat today. My purpose was really to give a more introductory discussion about what Wizard Lab is and kind of how it works, a little bit about behind the scenes with that engine discussion, etc. I apologize. I know, some of you guys have been using the system for a while and you're looking for things that are more advanced, right? And so we're trying to kind of mix it up by having some chats be about the advanced topics and some chats be about the more basic topics. We try to lead you guys in the right direction based on the description that we're showing out in the Twitter webpage. So we've got a lot going on here. We're very busy, and we're really excited to be able to offer these tools to you because we really know in our hearts that this is kind of the future of trading, delivering more tools and more things for the trader so that they can analyze the market, and everything is moving towards this server side, almost cloud type infrastructure. This is really where everything's headed, and that's kind of the direction we're pushing it. So I want to wrap this up by encouraging you to follow us on Twitter, because that's where we give the announcements about what these chats are going to be about. Go to the website www.prodigiorts.net, and you can find all of these videos archived, and you can also take advantage of the forum. But please join us in the chat room, especially in the morning. If you're trading during the day, join us in at anytime between 9:15 and 11 o'clock. Thanks. I appreciate all the nice comments from you guys. That's what keeps us going. It's very motivating. But yeah, we've got some really big builds that we're working on, and we hope to just be able to provide more and more for you guys. So, all right, thanks guys. Thanks for joining us today. Join us next week, and we're going to talk about what we're actually going to talk about. It seems like, and you guys can can post this in the chat. It seems like we've got a lot of requests for some more advanced topics. I want to hear from you guys. Let us know. Whether you want to see more advanced stuff, more basic stuff. Again, we want to make sure that we bring everybody in, get everybody up to speed. Questions about the TDA accounts. You can get Prodigio on paper money on the TDA accounts, but I recommend that in order to take advantage of the full system, and especially the back testing, the live servers have the best back testing. It's not difficult to fund a Thinkorswim account, but they are working on several things on the TDA side just to get everything consolidated. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and I'm going to wrap this up by inviting you to the next chat. And give us some ideas, give us some suggestions. We're going to talk about it. It might be a more advanced one unless there's a big request for some more basics. But we'll play it by ear with you guys. All right, so thanks everybody. This is Brian Wagner, Chief Architect of Prodigio RTS, getting back to the development side, and I'll sign off for this week, but I'll see you guys all again next week. Take care everyone, and great trading to all of you.